You hear this? You hear this? This is what you get for going out and doing things with people.
This is macOS Ken.
No regrets. Notes from the financial front, a couple of Apple court reports, and I am considering the iOS 27 beta. Installing it, I mean. It is Wednesday, the 15th of July, 2026. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by OneSkin, a new standard for your skin. Try it now with 15% off using code macOSKen at oneskin.co/macOSken. This show is also sponsored by Clean My Mac, keeping Macs running smoothly since 2008. Could you do what Clean My Mac does? A lot of it, but why would you when there's Clean My Mac? Clean My Mac finds duplicate files on your Mac and in your cloud services, roots out weird bits of installs left on your computer, figures out which apps you're not using anymore. It's stuff we could all do, but don't really think about. Clean My Mac does it at the push of a virtual button. Then there's the stuff you can't do, like scanning for malware and running various optimization routines under the hood. Even if you could, though, you didn't buy a Mac to maintain it. Let Clean My Mac do the work of keeping your Mac in shape so you can do the stuff you bought your Mac to do. Get tidy today. Try 7 days free and use my code MacOSKen20 for 20% off at clnmy.com/macosken. Make macOS Ken all caps both places. That way they know where you heard about it and you get the discount. Try 7 days free and use my code MacOSKen20 for 20% off at clnmy.com/macosken. Again, macOS Ken is all caps both places. Use code MacOSKen20 for 20% off at clnmy.com/macosken. What drove Apple shares down about 2.5% on Tuesday? As always, trying to pick a single reason would likely be folly. And yet, the only negative thing I saw on Tuesday was a downgrade from a major bank whose analyst was already iffy on Apple shares. Apple 3.0 ran part of a note from KeyBanc analyst Brandon Nispel, and I gotta say, I kinda hate it. Not because he's not into Apple, a lot of people aren't. I hate it because he's building his note around an anticipated slowdown in unit growth. For iPad and the Mac, that's thanks to the recent price increases. As for iPhone, he and his see U.S. carriers pulling back on device subsidies. That'll have Apple relying more on international growth, though that gets difficult in a rising price environment. Team Nispel thinks consensus iPhone growth of 8% in 2027 is too aggressive. I assume that's just units, not revenue or share. Assuming it is units, he's setting himself up for support this fall. As we talked about off and on for weeks, iPhone units are expected to fall this year. That's because a big catalyst for iPhone sales, the release of the entry-level iPhone, is probably being pushed to next year. While his note says that near-term numbers seem reasonable, when we get to the end of the year and unit shipments seem to have fallen, he's free to say, see, these numbers look worse than even I expected. I know, makes it sound like I think he's acting nefariously. I think what I would rather say is, he is carefully selecting data to support a future position. He's also potentially setting up a domino rally. Fewer units results in slowing user growth, according to the analyst, and drives KeyBanc's expected services growth to decelerate to 7% in fiscal year 27 versus the street's expectation of roughly 12%. That note may have made it a little nispily out. He dropped his rating on Apple shares from sector weight to underweight, and yet he kept the same price target of $250 underwater by roughly $65. Likely to disagree with Nispel if he ever got them in a room together is Citi research analyst Asia Merchant. Is she new to the Apple covering front? It's not a name I know, and yet a piece from Barron's had her coming out of the gate raising Citi's price target on the Cupertino company stock. Working in Apple's favor, in Merchant's opinion, the anticipated iPhone launch month after next represents an important catalyst that could further strengthen investor sentiment. She indicates that Apple's ability to selectively raise prices will help offset margin pressures, while its loyal customer base limits demand weakness. And she thinks price hikes are coming for the iPhone line, with more focus likely on the higher-end models, where she and hers believe demand is more resilient. Merchant has a buy rating on Apple shares. She used this week's note to raise her price target on the shares from $315 to $365. OpenAI had kind of a funny reaction on Tuesday to last week's lawsuit brought by Apple. I told you yesterday about Apple suing the AI giant over alleged trade secret theft, with Apple saying OpenAI took its intellectual property in order to develop its own consumer hardware. Embedded in the suit, according to a piece from the Wall Street Journal, was the question of whether any part seen by OpenAI while it was hiring Apple engineers were sensitive, something Apple doesn't offer evidence of and is seeking discovery to determine. In its suit, the Cupertino company said Apple lacks visibility into what's been happening behind closed doors at OpenAI, where such misconduct is normalized and exemplified by leadership. OpenAI had an immediate response. Late last week, that company said, "We have no interest in other companies' trade secrets. We remain focused on building innovative technology that empowers people everywhere." Then on Tuesday, a piece from Mac Rumors had OpenAI saying in part, "While we take these allegations seriously, we're not aware of any evidence that this complaint has merit." Hey, do you think that's maybe why Apple wants a look-see? I want to say the obvious thing. Can I go ahead and say the obvious thing? I'm not saying that OpenAI is guilty. I will say there have been about 1 billion complaints that OpenAI and other artificial intelligence firms trained their various models on the products and intellectual property of the planet, neither asking for permission nor offering compensation or even credit. But how could Apple accuse them of stealing? Remember yesterday when we talked about Apple's response to Epic's response to Apple's request to pause the lower court case over commissions on apps to be collected for sales of apps outside of Apple's App Store? Apple's response came in this week when it was supposed to. You will be shocked to hear Apple disagrees with Epic. We can go over it all, but why? It's now in the hands of Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers. If she agrees with Apple, everything will be paused until probably next summer. If she disagrees, Apple will have 24 hours to offer its external commission suggestions. Also, even if she doesn't want to pause the whole thing, Apple's asking her to go ahead and pause it anyway. According to a piece from 9 to 5 Mac, Apple asked that if Judge Gonzalez-Rogers denies the stay, she pause the proceedings anyway so the company can ask the Ninth Circuit or Supreme Court to keep them on hold while the Supreme Court separately reviews the underlying contempt ruling. You know, going to a judge and saying, even if you don't want to, go ahead and do it, that takes chutzpah. For the first time, I think ever, I'm thinking about putting a public beta on my iPhone. Years ago, I ran some series of public betas on my iPad, but that wasn't risky since my iPad is mostly a consumption device as opposed to a production device or a device on which I rely. My phone, though, yikes. The thing is, just about everybody, probably not Apple Insider, but just about everybody else, seems comfortable with normies taking the plunge on this beta. Lewis Wallace at Cult of Mac says iOS 27 public beta arrives and it's stable enough to trust. Over on YouTube, tech columnist Joanna Stern says you don't have to be brave to run the iOS 27 beta. You might have to be patient, though. Acknowledging that Siri AI is the real reason to try it out, there is a wait list for that. Additionally, once you're off the wait list, it'll take a while for your data to index. While Wired doesn't say folks should download it, the site's Reese Rogers writes a glowing review of Siri AI and doesn't warn people against the beta. And finally, Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD on Threads, says iOS 27 is in full public beta form now, and I think you should get this one. There's also a YouTube video because that's what he does. I will say when I watched the video, I wasn't sure in that whether he was saying download the beta or download iOS 27 when it's officially released this fall. But with the Threads message at least, sounds like he thinks it's good to go. All of that said, Sarah Perez at TechCrunch is being level-headed. She's not against people installing the beta. She's just cautious. Overall, she says, the developer betas this year have been fairly stable, which makes the public beta much easier to recommend this time around. Of course, installing a beta should always be approached with caution. If your device must run perfectly smoothly and never experience errors, then you may want to hold off until the public launch of iOS 27, expected in September. If you do, or if you have installed the various blankOS 27 betas, there's another about which you may want to know. Mac Rumors ran a piece Tuesday that had Apple making new AirPods firmware available to public testers. Unlike most AirPods updates, we actually know why for this one. According to the report, blankOS 27 for iPhone, iPad, and the Mac is adding a new AirPods interface, a slider for adaptive mode, and support for custom EQ, so the firmware lets public beta testers use those features. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, OneSkin, a new standard for your skin. I've told you how into OneSkin's OS 1 face I am. It's made my face feel softer and worked on dry, flaky patches I've had for years. There is something else they want you to know about. OneSkin's Summer Bundles. That's their skincare and SPF essentials paired together. Up to 80% of visible skin aging starts with sun exposure. These bundles help fight that with the same great skincare as OS 1 Face, plus mineral SPF protection from UV exposure. The summer bundle works on your skin today and protects against future UV damage. Learn more at oneskin.co/macOSken. With over a decade of research behind it, OneSkin's OS 1 peptide is proven to target the visible signs of aging, helping you unlock your healthiest skin now and as you age. For a limited time, try OneSkin with 15% off using code macOSken at oneskin.co/macOSken. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code macOSken. They're going to ask how you heard about them. When they do, please be sure and let them know it was macOSken. Try OneSkin now with 15% off using code macOSken at oneskin.co/macOSken. Something some people seem really excited about, the return of Madden. Not the guy, though that would be newsworthy. No, I mean the Madden NFL game series. A piece from Engadget says it is coming back to the Mac for the first time in nearly 2 decades, and it's doing it through Apple Arcade. According to the report, the franchise is making its debut on Apple Arcade. Subscribers will be able to play Madden NFL 27 Arcade Edition on iPhone, iPad, the Mac, and Apple TV starting on the 7th of August, 6 days before PC and console versions drop. Play a game, manage a team, do it on an Apple computer for the first time since the second Bush administration. Engadget says Madden NFL 27 Arcade Edition marks the series' return to the Mac after a 19-year absence. The last game in the franchise that was available for Mac was NFL Madden 08, which was released in 2007. The Apple TV action comedy Mayday has a trailer. 9 to 5 Mac reminds us about this one. It's got Kenneth Branagh playing an ex-KGB agent to Ryan Reynolds, hotshot U.S. Navy pilot. When the pilot has to eject over a late 1980s Soviet Union, he's discovered by the ex-KGB guy, a gruff man with a penchant for American culture. Now all they have to do is sneak him out of the USSR. The film was written and directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. They worked on such movies as Horrible Bosses and the Chris Pine Dungeons & Dragons film. Mayday hits Apple TV on Friday, the 4th of September. You can catch the trailer on YouTube. You can also expect to hear a lot more about it over the next couple of weeks once Comic-Con comes to town. Well, it comes to town if you're in San Diego. For the first time ever, a piece from Deadline says Apple TV is taking over Hall H. That's the big room at Comic-Con, the one where Marvel and DC wow crowds with big stars and bigger projects. The Cupertino streamer has a zippy 2-hour panel planned for Saturday, the 25th of July from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Titles set to shine include the horror comedy Widow's Bay, the John Cena Mattel action movie Matchbox, the Ryan Reynolds movie Mayday, as well as the series Dark Matter and Silo. The Hall H can be hard to get into. If you can't make that happen, though, there are other Apple happenings. They include a special sneak preview of Dark Matter Season 2 on Friday, the 24th of July, and the Silo Experience. Deadline describes that as a multi-sensory installation that'll transport visitors into the silo itself. The Silo Experience runs Friday, the 24th of July through Sunday, the 26th. Comic-Con runs Thursday, the 23rd of July through that following Sunday. And finally today, if you're looking for something to watch right now, it is time to get lucky. The Anya Taylor-Joy crime drama Lucky has started its run on Apple TV. Describing the show, Apple TV says when a multi-million-dollar heist goes sideways, con artist Lucky is forced to go on the run. Pursued by both the FBI and a ruthless crime boss, Lucky must fight for her life and a way out. Audiences haven't really had a chance yet, but critics dig it. It's got a fresh score of 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. The first 2 episodes of Lucky are up now on Apple TV. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Clean My Mac. Try 7 days free and use my code MacOSKen20 for 20% off at clnmy.com/macosken. This show is also sponsored by OneSkin, a new standard for your skin. Try it now with 15% off using code MacOSKen at oneskin.co/macosken. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can find me on Mastodon, macOSken at mastodon.social. You can also send me an email, info@macosken.com. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
It's still sunny.